this bill having referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Jaspers to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, I bring you the House Committee Substitute, House Bill 653. Members, all hands have been on deck helping with our communities deal with COVID-19. This bill will simply allow for our pharmacists to continue to offer testing for COVID-19 in serology, that's antibody testing, and the interpretation of the results for 12 months after the ending of the public health emergency is ended by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Mr. Speaker, that's all it does. Be glad to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you. I yield well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 653. The ayes are 170. The nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 231.
House Bill 231 by Representative Gaines, the 117th and others, to be entitled an act to amend Article 7, Chapter 5 of Title 16 and Article 1 of Chapter 13 of Title 19, the official code of Georgia, annotated, relating to stalking and granting of relief by superior courts. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Non-Civil, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Gaines to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud to bring before you this afternoon House Bill 231, legislation that marks a significant step forward in our efforts against domestic violence in Georgia. Over the last several months, we worked with advocates, and in particular, I want to thank Chairman Mandy Ballinger and Representative B. Wynn for their work on this legislation. I also want to thank Chairman James Burchett and the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee for their hard work in getting the language right in this bill and its unanimous passage out of committee. Georgia is one of only 3 states that does not extend civil protections to victims of dating violence. Our current law denies access to potentially life-saving relief for some of the most at-risk victims of relationship violence, including those who are pregnant, teens, and young adults in dating relationships. Young women ages 16 to 24 experience the highest rates of abuse, almost triple the national average. This legislation would extend safety to victims who experience abuse by a dating partner by creating dating protective orders under Georgia law. Our current law is insufficient for victims. Working with Chairman Burchett and the committee, we fine-tuned the language, creating a new section outside the Family Violence Protective Order specifically for dating violence. Temporary protective orders are tools for victims seeking safety from abuse and are also an effective mechanism for abuser accountability. This bill will ensure that those in dating relationships and potentially some of the most vulnerable in our state have access to this life-saving relief. States who have proactively included dating partners in their protections under temporary protective orders have seen an 11% reduction on the total rate of intimate partner homicide. 47 other states already ensure victims of dating violence are covered in their laws, and I'm proud that with this body's support today, we'll be one step closer to joining them. Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Be happy to.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
I do.
How would this bill affect those in the LGBTQ community?
Well, this legislation would impact any victim of dating violence that would fall under the language in the bill.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well and ask for this body's favorable consideration.
Chair recognizes Representative Nguyen to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to take a moment today to thank Representative Gaines and Chair Ballinger for working on this issue, as well as members of the Judiciary Committee and the many advocates who helped us bring this bill forward. And I think it is important just to talk about how this legislation will save the lives of Georgians. In the past year since the pandemic has began, Georgia has seen a 79% increase in domestic violence. Domestic violence is an issue that impacts all communities, and it transcends age, race, gender, geography, political party, and economic means. But what we do know is that it does disproportionately impact women and girls, and that it is a cycle, if not broken, will become deadly. Georgia actually ranks number 10 in terms of women who are killed by men, and the majority of these cases are connected to domestic violence. I was startled and alarmed to learn that 49% of victims who began their relationship with the person who eventually killed them were between the ages of 12 and 24. So with this temporary protective order in place, victims can seek immediate relief. They won't have to wait until additional incidences of violence or escalation before receiving protection. With this temporary protection order in place, the court can also order the abuser to seek counseling or to participate in educational programs offered by the state, because we know that abusers do not simply stop abusing. So this is about intervention and breaking the cycle for both persons involved. And if we pass this, it will save the lives of Georgians. Thank you. I yield the well.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 231 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 231. The ayes are 174, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 579.
House Bill 579 by Representative Oliver, the 82nd, to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 75 of Title 36, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to war on terrorism, local assistance, so as to change a short title to the Public Safety and Judicial Facilities Act. This bill item referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Chair recognizes Chairman Oliver to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 579 is a general bill that allows all counties to create an authority for the purpose of doing renovations or constructions of public safety or courts. Only DeKalb County has used this, so it's really application of a referendum that was imposed by DeKalb in 2007 is the only county that's had that burden. I think it's prevented other counties from being able to use this act, and I ask for your favorable consideration to remove the requirement of the referendum from the Public Safety and Judicial Facilities Act. Water authorities, housing authorities, hospital authorities don't have referendums. It was totally an anomaly in this case historically. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 579. The ayes are 169, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 258.
House Bill 258 by Representative Saints, the 180th and others, to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sexual offenses so as to provide a response to State v. Williams, decided February 10th, 2020. This bill having referred to the Committee of Judiciary Non-Civil, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Sains to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is relatively simple. It is a response to State v. Williams 2020, which had it to where a step-grandfather almost got away with a sexual battery to his 4-year-old step-granddaughter because the Supreme Court dictated that in the cases of sexual battery and aggravated sexual battery, the defense to prosecution of an individual being, a victim being under 16 must be codified to be utilized. So this fixes that by putting in statute that when an alleged victim is under the age of 16 and such actions are for a sexual nature, that a consent of the victim cannot be used as a defense to prosecution. With that, I'll yield for questions if there are any.
If you yield for questions.
One question, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin up in the gallery to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
It's good to see you, Representative. Is it not true that this bill passed out of committee with bipartisan support because it balances the need to prevent proving consent in those cases with having a definition of the statute that ensures that parents and other caretakers and people dealing with small children innocently don't get swept up in the statute?
Gentleman knows what he speaks very well. It's a very balanced and measured approach. We take sexual battery. A major element of that crime is the consent itself. To take that away, there were some fears that it would make it easier to charge. So this is a very balanced bill for those specific circumstances where that should clearly not be applicable. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the passage of House Bill 258, the ayes are 173. The nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 479.
House Bill 479 by Representative Reeves, the 34th and others to be titled an act to amend Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to criminal procedure so as revise certain arrest powers. This bill having referred to the Committee on Judiciary, that committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Representative Reeves to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, it's worth repeating. I said this in committee, but having the opportunity to become involved with this legislation after the work that Chairman Efstration had done to set it up was really like being a Braves relief pitcher and being called in the game after Greg Maddux had pitched a perfect game. And so I'm very privileged and I'm very thankful for the work that my friend, Chairman Chuck Efstration, brought us on this very important issue. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to talk a little bit about history and about this room. And I love coming in this room. It's an incredible privilege. It's an honor. It's a rare honor. Not a lot of Georgians get the chance to do what we get to do. And as crazy as this room is while we're in here doing our business, if you come in here early enough or if you stay late enough, you can be the only person in this room and you can sit here all by yourself. And it's a very quiet place, and I love doing that, and I've done that for the last 7 years on multiple occasions. I love looking at the ceiling, the wood. I love the history of these desks. If you've never heard it, you should ask Chairman Matt Dollar about these desks. He knows more about the history of these desks than maybe anything else he knows. So I love the way it smells in here, the wood. Keith Williams, the Speaker's lawyer, has got a picture in his office. In a non-COVID year, I sit over here in the first row in the corner, and he's got a picture in his office from my desk, facing this way, of this room from the year 1895. And it looks almost the same as it does right now. About a year ago, I saw that picture and had him send it to me, and the picture really kind of made me reflect. And what it made me reflect on was if these walls could talk. If these walls could talk, and if the walls of the Capitol in Milledgeville from 1907 to 1967, and the other building in Atlanta from 1968 till 1889 when this building was erected, if those walls could talk, what would they say? There's been a lot of really great things, a lot of good things that have happened in this room, and we celebrate those things. There's also been some not so great things that have happened in this room. And one of the greatest opportunities that we have, that anybody that gets this chance and just this little sliver of history to come into this room and have access and to be able to voice a vote on an issue, one of the greatest opportunities, and frankly, one of the greatest obligations that we have is to correct some of the wrong things that happened in this room. And I think that that's an opportunity that we have before us right now. You know, I don't take for granted one bit of this experience. If the Georgia General Assembly is a pie chart, then 2021 is just a little tiny piece of pie in that big pie that makes up the history of this state and everything that's been done legislating in Georgia. And so here we are. The way that it has worked out is that everybody in this room right now is a part of this 2021 session, and we've got the opportunity to do something that's important. Mr. Speaker, I have thought a lot this legislative session about the concept of legacy, and I'm not going to talk much longer, but I've thought a lot about legacy. I wanted to, about 8 years ago in February, a little bit more than 8 years ago, was when I decided that I was going to run to be a part of this body. When I was a high school junior at North Cobb High School, Miss Linda Morrison was my teacher, and she inspired in me a desire to do this, and that's something that I'd worked really hard for. And 8 years ago, decided to do that. And so when I decided that I was going to run for this position, I didn't even know my wife yet. I hadn't met her. I met her later that summer, and our entire year of dating was campaigning. And so I won, and I came into this thing with all of these ambitions and all of these thoughts about what it means to leave a legacy in this room, to leave a legacy in my community, to try to do some good things in Georgia and really try to make Georgia a better place. And that was my idea of what this concept of legacy meant. And I got to tell y'all something. Something happened. As I said, I married my wife. My wife came with a 5-year-old. My stepson, Charlie, is 12 now, but he was 5 years old. And so by the time I came into this room, I had a 5-year-old stepson. And then my son, Albert the Hurricane, came within my first year of being in this body. Albert was born. And I say this to say this is very important, is that something happened to me simultaneously as I got to experience this in what I thought was going to be my important legacy. What I realized is that what the important legacy is your family and your children. My boys, Albert and Charlie, are my legacy. And it's not what we do in here, but it's the people that love us and the people that we love. And those two boys is what my legacy is. And I learned that, and I've learned that every day for the last 7 years. And I say all that to talk about Ahmaud Arbery. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do in carrying this legislation is to spend some time on the telephone with Miss Wanda Cooper Jones, and that's Ahmaud's mother. And I've talked to her a few times. I've texted with her a bunch. She's gracious. She's so thankful for what we're doing. She handles herself with incredible dignity. Her son is gone in the senseless violence that the whole world had the opportunity to see. She has pain and she has hurt, but she is thankful for what we are doing here. But her ability, I talked about my legacy that I want to leave my boys. Her ability to leave that legacy in Ahmaud and watch Ahmaud's legacy was taken from her. And Ahmaud's father, Marcus Arbery, has said he does not want his son's death to be in vain. And I'm going to tell y'all something. Ahmaud's death is not in vain. I'm going to say it again. Ahmaud's death is not in vain. because we're going to bring change. We are bringing change. Ahmaud and his life and his legacy is going to be that agent of change. And in this General Assembly in 2021, every single one of us have the opportunity to take part in Ahmaud's legacy. And we owe that to his mother. We owe that to his father and all of his family and friends and loved ones. And we owe it to Ahmaud. And so I'm asking everybody in this room, I want us all to rise to the occasion, and let's rewrite a law from history, but let's also rewrite future history in Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I will yield for any questions.
You have some questions if you yield.
I will.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chairman F. Stration, to your left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, yield.
I do.
To the administration floor leader, isn't it true that all 50 states have some form of a citizen's arrest law on the books? And by passing this bill here today, and if it's ultimately enacted, Georgia would be the first state in the country to repeal the citizen's arrest law.
That's absolutely right, and it's incumbent on Georgia that we do that in light of what happened in our state last February.
And isn't it true, Representative, that building on the great work that this state did passing the hate crimes law in 2020, we could send a message nationally that Georgia's too great to hate, thanks to this legislation, the bipartisan effort, and the leadership of Governor Kemp in bringing this issue this year?
The gentleman knows of what he speaks. I'll continue to yield, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you yield?
I do.
Has there been consideration to naming this the Ahmaud Arbery Act, since we all know it's very clear?
That has not happened, but I have absolutely no reservations and concerns about, as this bill carries on into the other body, of making that a part of this. And I think that that's actually a fantastic idea. I'll continue to yield, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Dukes in room 341.
Would the gentleman yield?
I do.
First of all, I want to thank you for bringing this legislation. Is it not true that these laws were passed probably 100 years or so ago?
158 years ago.
And is it not true that this is one of those attempts that we're driving for in this nation and in this state to right grievous wrongs that have been perpetuated against the Ahmaud Arbery's of the world?
Not just Ahmaud Arbery. I've researched this issue on my own, and I know that it is a fact that there were decades of lynchings that took place in Georgia where this law was used as part of that justification.
I want to thank the gentleman for bringing this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'll continue to yield.
You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's get this done, y'all.
We have a number of members who wish to be heard on the measure. Chair recognizes the Dean of this House, Dean Smyrie, to speak to the bill.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, you know, last year we passed the hate crime bill. I thought about it and I said this was such a historic occasion, and I'll never forget. I remember calling Representative Al Williams. I know he's going to speak, and I was on my way to Brunswick, and at the last minute, I decided not to go. and then I went to bed. Then I woke up the next morning with Ahmaud Arbery on my mind. And I got up, and during that time we were in the heat of COVID. And I knew my colleague, Representative Carolyn Hughley, I had talked to. And she was going, and I called her, and I decided to drive to Brunswick. And it sort of transitioned me in a way that when you're in a car and you're driving and you're alone and you're talking and you're thinking. And I thought about what we were doing as it relates to the hate crime bill. And during that call, I called maybe 8 members of this House on the way, and one of them was Gloria Frazier, Representative Frazier. And she was in the process of having Ahmaud Arbery's mother that day in Waynesboro. And I called the speaker. I told him about my conversation. And we were working on the hate crime bill, and I called Representative Chuck Estration, and I say, you know, when we get this behind us, we ought to repeal citizens' arrest. And it's not my idea. It's others that have talked about that for years. And so I went there and I visited and I met the family, and in the heat of COVID, I got back in my car and I drove back to Columbus. And I made up my mind at that juncture that citizens' arrest ought to be the next thing we tackle. And as a member of the conference committee on the hate crime bill, there was not a meeting that we didn't talk about citizens' arrest repeal. And hate crime was a very, very emotional issue for me. And I literally broke down at our press conference after the passing of the bill. I was very emotional because Georgia had moved a dark cloud from over his state. And here we are, fast forward now, and I want to thank the governor's floor leader. During the interim, I talked to Representative Estration a couple of times, and I said, we ought to do something about citizens' arrest. It's lingered too long. Too much has happened. Too many people have died. And now is the time for us to move the cloud again on citizens' arrest. And I promised Ahmaud Arbery's mother that the Lord willing, when we get back to Atlanta in 2021, that there's going to be a group that's going to come together to pass citizens' arrest. And I come today to ask you to vote yes on House Bill 479. I will say this, that day in Brunswick was a turning point for me. Brunswick is a great city, and I kind of felt the change in the air there. And so the bill itself, a lot of people have worked on it and have worked out, I think, some of the issues that were intertwined in the legislation. But I just come today with a heavy heart, asking you to vote yes. Now is the time. If not now, when? Now is the time. Now is the time for us to act. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, I thank you for allowing me to come and to say a few words and to thank the gentleman again and all those that have worked on this legislation on House Bill 479. So again, now is the time. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Frazier to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To Ms. Wanda Cooper and your family, I know you're watching. This is a rose from you, from a mother to a mother. Less than 3 weeks ago, on February 23rd, which was on a Tuesday, we had session. I got in my car and I drove back to Augusta to be a part of Ahmaud Arbery's vigil that they were having at his gravesite. We gathered among hundreds of citizens at the gravesite of Ahmaud Arbery to both celebrate his short life of 25 years and to grieve his loss on this 1-year anniversary of the senseless and brutal murder that took his life. And while I stood in awe at the love and the support that was demonstrated during the vigil, I was shaken to the core by the deep cry of his mother, Wanda Cooper Jones. Representative Reeves stated how calm she was when he talked to her, how she was so self-preserved. But on this day, on the anniversary of his death, Miss Wanda Cooper gave a cry out that I will never, ever forget. She repeated, "That was my baby." She repeated, "He was my baby." And she said it about 15 times, falling to the ground. That pain uttered, those words she said, broke everybody down at that gravesite. It's a kind of pain that no mother should ever have to endure. It's the kind of pain that comes from losing one of your most treasured gifts, your child. Over the past year, I have had the honor of working directly with Ms. Cooper, and my aspiration and respect for her have grown tremendously. She has the strength of a titan. I tell you, her strength and courage and her persistence have been a driving force in ensuring that her son's death receives the attention that it deserves and that his killers are ultimately brought to justice. Her resilience and perseverance serve as a testament to depths of a mother's love for her child. I recently read an article about the deep fear that Black mothers carried raising their children in America. Black mothers interviewed, this story said that they realized that all mothers worry about their children. As mothers, we want our children to have the best. When they're happy, we are happy. When they're sad, we feel their pain. As mothers, we hope our children choose good friends. We hope that they apply themselves in school and become successful and responsible citizens. We hope they stay away from drugs and alcohol and that they avoid unnecessary dangers. But the uniqueness of challenges for Black mothers is that we have this extra layer of fear, this griping reality of the dangers our children face, because we know that while they are our babies, to someone else, they might seem to be a threat. It's an anxiety that Black mothers live with every day. unfortunately passed along to our children because we want them to stay safe as possible. There is nothing more sobering than having that talk with your children. I have 2 adult daughters. We've had the talk, and I still talk to them, although they are up in age. No, I'm not referencing to talk about dating or talk about college plans or your career goals. I'm referring to the uncomfortable conversation that black mothers have with their children, informing them that regardless of how amazing they are, how incredibly brilliant they are, or how kind and loving they may be, they may also be feared. They may seem as a threat, subsequently harmed because they are viewed that way. And although it is not right, and although it is not fair to them, it is reality in which we live. It is no secret that Ahmaud was failed. It is no secret that his life was cut short at the young age of 25 because someone saw him as a threat and thought they could take his life and hide behind a law. And while we have been seeing progress over the past years with arrests and indictments of his shooters, today we are presented with an opportunity to address and overhaul the outdated law that has been used to unfairly target black and brown men and women in the state of Georgia. We have the opportunity to ensure that this law, originally penned back in the 19th century, is no longer misused and abused by those with racially motivated ill intentions. We have an opportunity to honor Ahmaud's legacy by shifting the narrative and making a declaration that the state of Georgia is committed to the just and fair treatment of each and every one of its citizens. So let's give Ms. Wanda Cooper a degree of peace for a lifetime of sorrow that she will suffer. I ask you to support House Bill 479 and show the world who's watching right now that Georgia will not tolerate racial profiling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Representative Al Williams to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In a corner of this state is some of the most beautiful real estate in America. I'm fortunate to have been born in that corner on the coast of Georgia. Some of the most beautiful areas in that beautiful area is found in the Golden Isles. The beautiful swimming waters of Glenn County. It's always been just below the surface that there were problems. As a youngster, in 1964, I can remember marching with Reverend J.C. Hope in Brunswick, then just to get the right to eat a hamburger. Then I can remember giants, some of whom were my mentors, who worked to bring about racial justice and understanding. My predecessor, Reverend E.C. Tillman, spent his life doing that. Gentlemen, we honored here on this floor this session, Mac spent his life coaching and working in education as a board member of Sea Island Corporation. When I first came as an employee of the Lieutenant Governor Zell Miller in 1975 to this beautiful dome, it was impossible to have a bill like this come to the floor and be debated 479 wasn't even in the making. As a matter of fact, we were at the point where the United States Supreme Court had to seat a duly elected representative. So while there's much room for growth, so much good has happened. In my first term, I represented the area that Abad lived in and where he was murdered. That was the first area I represented when I was sworn in 2003. And it's unfortunate that I know one of the gentlemen that is incarcerated for his murder. He worked with one of my sons. He worked in Liberty County, though he lives in Brunswick. But the time has come. You see, no wrong ever reaches a point where it can't be made right. And this is the time to be a shining example. At the coast of Georgia is not just one of the most beautiful places in the world that entertains some of the great figures of the world. When in my freshman year, I worked on a committee down there for the G8. What an experience. Leaders from all over the world. At the Coaster, one of the premier stops in all the world. But it's not good enough for a state to be the best state to do business in. For it cries out for that state, from Washington State to the tip of Miami, from the Alleghenies of New York to the flatlands of Texas, folks should say, Georgia is one of the best places to live. Living. Bart Arbery would not be able to live this beautiful life on the beautiful coast of Georgia. But as I said some weeks ago, all things work together for good. And his death has created good. 479 is the good that comes out of his death. As sad as it is, and how it looks like there is no light, out of his death comes this day that we have the opportunity to say to America that this is not the Georgia of old. This is not the Georgia where a slave ship stopped in the Sound off of Jekyll Island, came around to St. Simon's, and Igbo warriors from Africa unloaded and revolted and ran away. And when they were almost caught, they drowned themselves in the river there in St. Simon's rather than be slaves. And when on a dark, silent evening on those coasts, you can hear the wailing of the Igbo souls. We're the new Georgia, where all men are created equal, and women. And Aubrey, thank God for your spirit. Thank you, his mother. Thank you, his father, for once again, all things have worked together for good. I urge you to vote for good for Georgia by supporting House Bill 479. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Chairman Don Hogan to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 479, I'm the second signer on that bill. When this tragedy happened, our community couldn't believe that it happened. Down in Satilla Shores, which is a great community in the south end of Glenn County, Aubrey Amon jogged that road every day. In fact, he lived across the road, and he had on his jogging shoes and his jogging outfit, and he was not doing anything wrong, but just jogging down the road as far as I know. And these three individuals, loaded with a shotgun and a pistol in the back of the first truck, and the fellow taking the picture with his camera, his cell phone, in the second truck. These men have been charged with murder, which they should be, because that was a heinous crime that was committed against a young man who is a citizen in my community. It's been very upsetting. Many sleepless nights, worried about the family. It happened in my community. The community is still very upset about it. We had individuals that demonstrated. We didn't have any writing. We had the people coming and supporting the community. Sheriff Neil Jump was very effective in making sure everybody got to demonstrate and do what they needed to do in the celebration of Ahmaud Arbery's life. And right after this happened, I got in touch with Representative Carl Gilliard, and he and I talked about the citizens arrest law. And I'd like to thank Chairman Chuck Abstration for doing what he did on the bill, because he worked very hard on it, and then Chairman Reeves for what he's done on it. But I think this is the right thing to do. It's supported by the community in Glenn County. We have some fine people down there that live in the island and in Glenn County. I've lived there 52 years, and it's one of the most wonderful places that you can have a family and that you can enjoy what we have in coastal Georgia. And I just would appreciate you supporting this bill and you voting for it. It's the right thing to do. It's an old bill, it's outdated, we have no need for it. The people that were trying to, I assume they were trying to arrest Ahmaud, but you know, they were not policemen, they were individuals, and people who are just individuals, I don't think they understand the law and they don't have what it takes to go out and try to arrest somebody as a citizen's arrest. I think it's the wrong thing to try to do. It's an outdated bill, and we don't need it. And I'd appreciate you voting for this legislation, because I think it's very meaningful to me. I'm still very upset about this situation, and it's something that we'll never get over. When you lose a child, that's the worst thing that I think can happen to a family. So please vote for this bill. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the will.
Chair recognizes Representative Bodie to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of HB 479. I rise today to make history with this noble chamber by the passage of HB 479. The current citizen's arrest statute in Georgia needs to be repealed. Mr. Ahmaud Arbery is the case that brings us here today, debating HB 479 on the floor of the Georgia House of Representatives. Mr. Minority Leader, today we have the opportunity to repeal a law that was passed during the Civil Rights era. No Georgia citizen should be permitted and allowed to pursue, chase, and attempt to make a citizen's arrest, like the series of events that led to the death of Ahmaud Arbery. On February 23rd, 2020, Ahmaud Arbery was just living his life. He was taking a run through a coastal residential neighborhood where his mother lived in Glenn County. I read that Ahmaud Arbery, who was a former standout football player in high school, liked to take runs. He liked to take the runs to clear his mind. Many of us in this noble chamber may sometimes just need to take a break, step back, and clear our minds after a long day. similar to the long day we're going to have today. You may want to take a morning workout to clear your mind. You may want to take an afternoon walk to clear your mind. You may want to just read a book after a long day of work to clear your mind. But Ahmaud Arbery liked to run to clear his mind. Now, on February the 23rd, 2020, Ahmaud Arbery's peaceful run was disrupted. And Mr. Ahmaud Arbery ultimately ended that run when his life was lost by the barrel of a shotgun. Those 2 shotgun blasts to the chest of Ahmaud Arbery was the end result of 2 men who jumped in their trucks to take the law in their own hands. This after the father and this father-son duo called 911, not once, Dean, but twice, to report that they thought a crime was being committed by Mr. Arbery in their neighborhood. The man told the 911 operator that it was a black man in shorts and a white t-shirt running through my neighborhood. Mr. Ahmaud Arbery had committed no crimes as the man made the 911 call. Now, it was later discovered when they directly spoke to the property owner that his home was not the subject of any burglaries. No property was ever stolen from his property. No property was damaged on his property. So why? Why? Why was Ahmaud Arbery shot and killed on February the 23rd, 2020? It was because 2 men that chased Mr. Arbery felt empowered by the citizen's arrest statute here in the state of Georgia. Just imagine what went through Ahmaud Arbery's mind after being chased for 4 minutes by not 1, but 2 trucks. 1 truck in front of him, blocking his pathway, and 1 truck behind him, blocking his retreat. All the men in those trucks were armed. Ahmaud Arbery was trapped. Where could he go? Ultimately, Ahmaud Arbery was shot twice and stumbled to the ground. Ahmaud Arbery was 25 years old. Yesterday, I was thinking about what would I say when I came to the well. How could I describe his last moments on earth in preparation to support this bill, HB 479? And then I thought about my college days at Valdosta State University in the late 90s. I enjoyed my time at Valdosta. I loved living in South Georgia. Other than family trips out of state, that was my first time being outside the metro area. I met friends and classmates from Thomasville, Nashville, Waycross, Macon, Adel, Rennes, and Moultrie, Georgia, just to name a few. During my summer semester of my junior year at VSU, I wanted to take up running, to stay in shape, to enjoy the beautiful residential neighborhood outside of my apartment complex. I did that to clear my mind after long days in class. Then it hit me. I was a black man running with a white t-shirt and shorts in a residential neighborhood in my 20s. And at that moment, I realized I could have been Ahmaud Arbery before Ahmaud Arbery. I yield the well, Mr. Speaker.
The time for debate has expired. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 479 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all the members in the gallery made it back and voted? Have all members now voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of House Bill 479, the ayes are 173. The nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Rules Committee for an announcement.
House Rules Committee will meet at 6:45. Thank you.
The chair is advised that there's dinner downstairs. We're going to break for dinner until 7 p.m. 7 p.m.